Good morning, AP Macro teachers. Today we're going to do lesson 4 out of Unit 2, which is the very last lesson on the unit on supply and demand. Today we're going to take care of a brief kind of video lesson plan on equilibrium in the marketplace, like what is it mean, and that'll allow us to wrap up heading into testing for Unit 2. So the big concepts here that the students need to know is that when talking about equilibrium, once we understand supply and once we understand demand, really the point of supply and demand, the thing that we're actually looking for and the thing that we care about is equilibrium. I want to know what's going to happen to the price of products in the marketplace, and I want to know what's going to happen to the volume of those products being produced and the volume of those products being consumed. So big concept number one is that competitive markets always move toward equilibrium all by themselves. So this is an important concept for the kids to understand, especially later when we talk about government intervention in the marketplace. Governments do not need to intervene into these markets, provided that they're competitive markets. Governments don't need to intervene to create equilibrium. Markets will move toward equilibrium all by themselves. This, once again, only works for competitive markets, though, meaning these need to be markets with many buyers and sellers, and there has to be free entry into and exit from the marketplace, meaning there's going to be no major barriers to entry, like governmental policies regulating who's allowed to produce a product or something like that. But as long as there's lots of buyers and buyers and sellers can freely enter into and exit the marketplace, we have a competitive market. Not all products in the marketplace are going to be produced in a competitive market, but we're going to focus just on the ones that are. We're not going to worry about monopolies or oligopolies in an AP macro course. That's something that the microeconomics students will be working on. So the second big question we want the kids to answer is, what is equilibrium? So we know that markets move toward equilibrium all by themselves. What the heck does that actually mean? The short version of this is that basically it's when quantity supplied and quantity demanded are equal to each other, meaning that we have neither a shortage of a product or a surplus of a product. I usually like to kind of give the kids the example, and I think the textbook does the same, of lines at the grocery store. So lines at the grocery store are always in equilibrium, and they're in equilibrium all by themselves. So when I walk up to the checkout, there's not one really short line and one really long line. All of the lines have roughly the same number of people in them, meaning that if I see the opportunity to better myself by picking a slightly shorter line, people are going to automatically gravitate toward that shorter line until it's no longer shorter. So this is essentially what equilibrium means. It means that everybody has found the way to better themselves the most, and that there are no more opportunities for you to make a better choice, that everybody in the marketplace is doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing what benefits them the most. So long story short, it means that quantity supplied and quantity demanded are equal, and we know that even if marketplaces are not in equilibrium, if it's a competitive market, they will naturally move toward equilibrium all by themselves. The last question we want to deal with, and kind of the one we're going to spend most of this video on, is why do markets move toward equilibrium? This is the point where you're going to want to introduce the concept of the invisible hand to kids. So basically what they need to know about the invisible hand, it comes from Adam Smith's On the Wealth of Nations. The invisible hand is basically the result of many individual actors who are interested in themselves. So a group of self-interested consumers and a group of self-interested producers doing what's best for themselves. The invisible hand is essentially the end result of all of their individual decisions. So if I do what's good for me and you do what's good for you and everyone else does what's good for them, at the end of the day, we're going to make some choices about what to produce in the market, at what price those things are going to be produced. And even though none of us actually sat down and made a choice, and the government didn't sit down and make that choice, our kind of the aggregation of all of our rational choices and all of us doing what's best for ourselves is going to result in some decisions being made. If you'd like, this is also the point where you can introduce the concept of dollar votes. So when I choose to purchase a product, I'm essentially voting with my dollars for that product to continue being produced and for that company to stay in business. And if I choose not to produce or not to consume a product, I'm voting for that company to go out of business and for that product to no longer be available on the marketplace. And this is kind of the cool thing about competitive markets. It's that nobody's really in charge of the market, right? There's no governmental entity deciding how many socks to produce. But even though nobody's in charge, we're all kind of in charge because each of our decisions plays a role in the final outcome of the marketplace. That's kind of the short version of why markets move toward equilibrium. The long version has to do with surpluses and shortages, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Before we can go into what the bigger mechanism that causes markets to move toward equilibrium is, it's important to get out of the way a couple of kind of definitional things for the kids. to make sure that they understand the concept so they don't get lost in the future explanation here. So now that we've drawn the equilibrium point here, we have two important pieces of information that's being provided to us. And that's going to be the market clearing price and the equilibrium quantity for this product, whatever product it is you're using as an example. The market clearing price is the price at which equilibrium is achieved. It's the price at which the quantity supplied is equal to the quantity demanded for a product. And changes in price are going to be the primary mechanism for changing quantity supply and quantity demanded, as we'll see in just a second when we talk about when prices are too high or too low. So MCP, or market clearing price, sometimes called equilibrium price, is the price at which the market achieves equilibrium. And at this point, it's at E prime here. Along the x-axis, the E prime also shows us what the equilibrium quantity is going to be. And this is going to tell you the amount of the product that's going to be bought and sold at equilibrium, or at the market clearing price. So although the supply curve and the demand curve, in theory, show us lots of possible combinations of price and quantity supplied or price and quantity demanded, all of those aren't actually going to end up getting produced by the market. The amount that's actually going to get made and the amount that's actually going to be consumed is the equilibrium quantity, and that equilibrium quantity is going to be set by the market clearing price. Now that we have the definitions out of the way, the next thing we need to ask is, all right, what happens when a market's not at market clearing price? What happens when a market's not at equilibrium? And by figuring out what happens when the market is not at equilibrium, it'll help us to understand why the market will always move itself toward equilibrium. Because markets aren't always in equilibrium, but they always move toward it. So if a market gets knocked out of equilibrium for some reason, like a shift in supply or a shift in demand, it doesn't take very long for that market to find its new equilibrium point. The question then becomes, why is that? So let's imagine a scenario where the price of a product is higher than the market clearing price. So we're basically trying to get more money for the product than people are willing to pay for it. At this point, we can see over here represented by P2, which is your second price point, the quantity supplied and quantity demanded at P2 are not the same number. We can see that at a price point of P2, producers are willing to supply a very high quantity of this product, but consumers are not willing to buy very much of it. And so what results is if all the stores set their price at price P2, they're going to end up with a surplus of this product. So the quantity supplied is substantially higher than the quantity demanded. And so after all the consumers who are willing to pay that high price purchase their goods, there's going to be a bunch of extra products just laying around on the shelves taking up space. So we can say for sure that if a price is above market clearing price, there will be a surplus of the product on the marketplace. Now, why is this bad, and why is this going to result in the price of the product falling? It's because surpluses are inefficient. If I'm running a business, I don't want to have a whole bunch of extra products just sitting on the shelves that nobody wants. It's a waste of resources. It's a waste of productive resources to overproduce this product. So because surpluses are inefficient and inefficiency is bad for business, we're going to see rational sellers attempt to get rid of that surplus. They're going to put it on clearance sale, or they're going to reduce the price of that product until the surplus disappears. And so if we have a product where the price is too high, over time, it's not going to be immediate, but over time, those sellers will reduce the price until the surplus disappears, eventually ending up at equilibrium, or eventually finding market clearing price for themselves. Now, keep in mind, nobody has to tell them to do this. This is a rational choice because sellers, in this case, want to have their businesses be successful, and only efficient businesses are successful. So in their quest for efficiency, they're going to lower the price all by themselves. Last but not least, let's take a look at what happens if the price of a product is below market clearing price. So taking a look at our graph here, we'll see that at the price point 3, quantity supplied is substantially below quantity demanded. So lots and lots of people want to buy this product at this low price, but only a couple of them are going to be able to actually do so because the quantity supplied at this price is going to be relatively low. So you have lots of buyers, very few sellers willing to sell the product at this price. And this creates what we call a shortage. So this is when the quantity demanded of a product is greater than the quantity supplied in the marketplace. Just like surpluses, shortages are also inefficient for the market because not only do customers not like shortages, so if you offer them a product at a low price and then they can't get it, they're going to get mad and they're going to hold that against you in the future. But in addition, if you have a shortage, that means that you as a seller are selling a price at a lower price point than the market is willing to bear. So customers are willing to pay $10 for this product, you're giving it to them for 5, and that in and of itself is inefficient as well. If your goal as a seller is to maximize profit, then selling a product below what the customer is willing to pay is a really, really bad way to do that. So when sellers see shortages happening, they automatically raise their prices because not only do you want to not have a lot of angry, irate consumers that aren't able to get the product at the advertised price, but you also want to maximize your profit potential and want to get as much money for your product as possible. So, kind of wrapping all this up, markets move toward equilibrium all by themselves, competitive markets anyway, because there's really no other option. So, if the price is too high, you're going to have a surplus of the product, and that's going to be inefficient and drive you out of business. If the price is too low, you're going to have a shortage of the product, and that's going to drive you out of business. So, the only real choice for a rational seller in the marketplace is to find that equilibrium price and to set your product there. It's where you don't have a surplus, you don't have a shortage, you're basically what we call selling through. So all of the products you put on the shelf are being sold. There's not a bunch of customers trying to get the products that can't. There's not a bunch of extra products laying on the shelves that aren't being sold. And so because sellers try to achieve efficiency, because efficiency is how you stay alive in the marketplace, the only efficient choice is to set your product at market clearing price. From here, the only other thing the students need to know or need to be able to do is to manipulate the graph. I would spend at least one entire day on manipulating the supply and demand graph using their determinants, make sure that they know merit and that they know tigers and that they know how to manipulate the graph and show changes in equilibrium. I'm not going to do that because there's a million different combinations of the graph that it could possibly be. But beyond this, all the students need to be able to do really is to actually draw the graph and show changes in it and make sure that they can interpret changes in the market clearing price and the equilibrium quantity for a product. Hopefully this has been helpful for you, and thank you for watching Unit 2.